Montana Territory, July 1883. Dust swirled at the edge of the dry hills, curling like smoke around the wedding tent pitched in the middle of the Barrow Ranch yard. Inside, Delaney Ashford stood barefoot on the wooden platform they called an altar, her pale blue dress clinging to her in the heat. The borrowed shoes that pinched too tight had been kicked off behind her minutes ago. Her toes curled against the planks as she stared out past the crowd over their stiff collars and judgmental eyes, searching for something that felt like freedom. Everything about the day tasted wrong. The lace at her neck scratched. The lavender perfume made her dizzy. The man waiting across from her, Martin Caldwell, smiled like a man already counting his cattle, and not the woman he was marrying. She did not love him. She never would. Her hands trembled at her sides. Her mother had told her to think of security, of land, of a future, but Delaney had never wanted a life measured by acreage and banknotes. She wanted something honest, something that beat like a heart. The preacher's voice droned on, but her ears were full of wind and memory. Then, just as her eyes drifted toward the hills again, she saw him. He was on horseback, riding slow and sure, sunlight flashing off the tin star pinned to his vest. His name was Judson Shaw, and he had once been the boy who gave her a carved wooden sparrow when they were both barely 15. She had not seen him in 6 years since he rode off to become a deputy in the southern counties, and her father made sure she never heard from him again. He was taller now, leaner, a man, and he was looking straight at her. Everyone turned as he rode closer, the silence thickening until even the preacher stopped mid-sentence. Judson brought his horse to a stop just outside the tent. Dust clung to his boots, his hat low over his brow. His voice was calm but cut through the quiet like a blade. "Come with me instead." Delaney's heart slammed against her ribs. "What the hell is this?" Martin barked, stepping toward her like he owned her. She did not look at him. Her eyes were on Judson, on the man who had known her heart before she did, the man who had not forgotten. "I am not yours," she said quietly. Then she stepped down off the altar, barefoot, dress swaying around her ankles. She walked past her mother's gasping mouth, past Martin's fury, past all the guests whispering like buzzards. She walked straight to Judson. He reached down from the saddle, offering his hand. Without hesitation, she took it, and he pulled her up behind him. The moment her arms wrapped around his waist, something in her chest settled, like she had been holding her breath for years, and finally let it go. They rode hard out of the Barrow Ranch, through the dry flats and into the tree line where the cottonwoods grew thick. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Delaney rested her cheek against his back, her fingers gripping his belt. When they finally reached a creek bed clearing shaded by pines, he dismounted and helped her down. They stood facing each other, breathing heavy from the ride. "You really came back," she said. "I never forgot you," he answered. "I heard about the wedding from a ranch hand 2 towns over. Rode all night." Delaney's eyes welled, but she blinked fast. "I thought you were gone for good. My father died 3 months ago, left me his land down in Willow Ridge. I came back to settle it. I figured you were already married by now." "I almost was." Her voice cracked, "but I could not do it." Judson stepped closer. "I saw you standing there, barefoot, like your feet knew before your heart did. I could not leave you there." Delaney let out a breath that was half a laugh, half a sob. "I forgot how steady you are." He reached up, brushing a curl from her cheek. "You remember what I told you that night before I left? You said I was your reason to come back. I still mean it." She closed her eyes, leaning into his palm. "I do not know what happens next. I have a cabin, land, no riches, but it is quiet and good. I want you there with me." Delaney opened her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt like herself. "Then take me home." They packed up at dawn the next morning. Judson gave her his boots, which were much too big, but better than nothing. He rode with her across the hills and into the low country, where the rivers ran cold and the meadows bloomed with wildflowers. His land was tucked behind a row of cottonwoods, the cabin small but solid. There were 2 horses, a goat with a bad attitude, and a garden that needed tending. It was not much, but it felt like everything. The first night, Delaney sat on the porch, her feet in his lap as he rubbed the soreness from them. "Do you regret it?" he asked her. She looked at him, her heart full. Not for a second. That night, they lay side by side on a straw mattress, the open window letting in the night sounds. He held her hand like it was a promise, and she fell asleep smiling. They had no preacher, no guests, but 2 weeks later, Judson carved her a ring from red cedar and asked her to be his wife. She said yes before he even finished the question. And she never wore shoes at their wedding either. The first real rain of the season came 3 days after Delaney and Judson settled into the rhythm of their quiet life. Not a storm, just a steady drizzle that softened the dirt paths and left the pines beaded with silver. Judson had gone down to the creek with a canvas sack slung over his shoulder, looking for the smooth river stones he used to line the garden rows. Delaney stayed behind with a tin bucket and a wooden stool, coaxing milk from the goat that had yet to decide whether she liked her. The goat kicked once, missed her shin, and then gave in with a low, grudging bleat. Delaney muttered something under her breath and kept going, her sleeves rolled high and rain dampening the hem of her dress. By the time Judson returned, she had the milk strained and cooling on the windowsill. He entered through the back, boots muddy, a bundle of wet sticks under one arm. "Got a few stones too," he said, setting everything down near the hearth. "Enough to finish the last row." She turned from the stove, brushing a lock of hair off her cheek. "The goat hates me. She hates everyone. That's how you know she's healthy." Delaney leaned against the counter, watching him peel off his wet shirt and hang it near the fire. His back was marked with the pale scars of old saddle rubs and barbed wire. She didn't ask how he got them. She figured the land left its own story on you, one scrape at a time. "You always this quiet?" she asked. Judson looked up, brow raised. "You sayin' I'm dull?" She shook her head. "I'm saying you have a way of letting the silence do the talking." He stepped closer, brushing a wet curl from her forehead. "You run from a life like that wedding. Silence feels like a blessing." She held his gaze a moment, then looked down at her hands. "I keep thinking someone's going to ride up the trail and drag me back." "No one's coming," he said. "Your choice was your own." Delaney swallowed, her throat tight. "They'll talk about it for years. Let 'em. They don't live your life." She nodded slowly, then turned and ladled stew into 2 tin bowls. They ate on the porch, wrapped in blankets, legs touching beneath the wool. Rain fell soft through the dusk, tapping against the tin roof. After a while, she leaned her head on his shoulder. "You ever think about what it would have been like if you never left?" He chewed a bite of bread, then answered, "I'd have stayed and your father still would have kept us apart. Might have ended up shot over it." "I was afraid of that too," she said softly. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Her head stayed against him, his warmth steady beside her. "I want to learn this life. I want to be useful." "You already are. I mean more than cooking and milking goats." Judson looked out at the trees, steam rising from the forest floor. "There's wild rye to cut before the frost, fence posts to mend before the ground freezes. You want useful, I got plenty." "Good," she said, sitting up straighter. "Then tomorrow I start." That night, she fell asleep with the scent of cedar smoke in her hair and the quiet rhythm of his breathing beside her. The wind moved through the trees, and the cabin held firm against it. Morning came pale and cold, the rain gone and the soil rich with promise. She rose before him, tying her boots with stiff fingers. There were calluses to earn, and she was ready now. She stepped outside alone, the air sharp in her lungs, and walked to the shed, where a shovel leaned against the wall. She was not a bride anymore. She was a partner, and the work would show it. By late August, the wind turned cooler in the mornings, and a faint yellow crept into the edges of the cottonwood leaves. Delaney rose earlier each day, her hands rougher now, her shoulders stronger. She no longer paused to second-guess herself when she lifted the axe or tied a bundle of rye. No one had to tell her what needed doing. She saw it in the ground, the animals, the way the light changed. One morning, while Judson was down by the eastern pasture setting a trap for the fox that kept dragging off their hens, Delaney found a folded scrap of paper wedged beneath a horseshoe on the porch rail. She recognized the handwriting before she opened it. Her mother's. She read it once, then again slower. The words were clipped, formal. A list more than a letter. Her father had taken ill. The land was being divided among her brothers. They didn't want her share. If she wanted anything from the house, her books, her mother's sewing chest, the quilt from her girlhood bed, she could come fetch them. Otherwise, it would all be given away or burned. She didn't say anything right away. Judson returned near dusk, his coat lined with burrs and a fresh tear in his sleeve. They ate supper quiet, the fire low, and she waited until he leaned back in his chair, half-full cup of chicory cooling beside him. "I need to go back into town." He didn't ask why. He studied her instead, fingers resting steady on the edge of the table. "How long?" "Just a day or two." "You want me with you?" Delaney shook her head. "I need to see it alone." He nodded once, no protest, just trust. "Take my mare. She's sure-footed." She packed the next morning before dawn. Only what she needed: bread, a blanket, and the pistol Judson insisted she carry. The ride to town took most of the day. She passed no one until she reached the stretch near Hollow Ridge, where the road curved between the bluff and the old cemetery. The fields looked drier than she remembered. She hadn't expected that to ache. When she reached the edge of town, she kept her head low beneath her bonnet. No one stopped her. A few glances lingered, but no words followed. The house stood where it always had, white paint peeling, the gate hanging crooked. A bucket sat overturned near the barn, and the front porch sagged more than before. Inside, it smelled of old dust and boiled herbs. Her mother didn't come to greet her. She found her in the parlor, mending a hem by lamplight. She didn't look up. "I didn't think you would come," she said. "I almost didn't." Her mother tied off the thread and set the needle aside. "He's upstairs. Doesn't speak much now." Delaney didn't move to go. Instead, she studied the worn rug, the familiar scrape in the floorboards near the hearth. "I didn't leave to punish you." Her mother's mouth tightened. "You left with a man the whole county says is nothing but a drifter. He's the only person who ever asked what I wanted." Silence stretched between them, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. "I came for my books," Delaney said at last. "And the quilt. That's all." Her mother stood. "They're in the chest by the stairs." Delaney turned to go, and the voice stopped her. "You seem different." She paused. "I am." She packed the items into a sack, tied it tight, and left without looking back. The road out of town felt shorter than the way in. The sky shifted orange near the horizon, and her mare's hooves clopped steady against the hard ground. Judson was on the porch when she arrived, oil lamp lit beside him, a book open in his lap. He stood when he saw her, took the bag from her hands, and didn't ask what had been said. She didn't offer. Instead, she stepped into the house, kicked off her boots, and let the warmth of the fire pull the chill from her bones. Later, lying beside him in the stillness, Her head tucked beneath his jaw, she spoke into the dark. "They didn't ask me to stay." He brushed his thumb along her back, slow and reassuring. "You're home already." Delaney closed her eyes, letting the truth of it settle deep. She didn't belong to that house anymore. She belonged here, where the work was honest and the air didn't press expectations down onto her chest. Where a man didn't need to say much to make her feel seen. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and the quilt from her childhood lay folded at the foot of their bed. She would cut pieces from it in time, stitch them into something new. But for now, it was enough just to rest beneath the roof they'd built together. The first frost came early that year. A silver hush lay over the rye fields at sunrise, and the air carried the kind of stillness that made every footfall feel louder than it should. Judson rose before the light, his breath visible as he pulled on his coat and stepped out to check the roofline for leaks. Delaney lay in bed a little longer, her body sore from the previous day's work digging a new root cellar trench. She liked the ache, the way it reminded her she belonged to this place now. By mid-morning, she had the stove hot and the last of the late apples simmering in a pot. The scent clung to the rafters, sharp and sweet. Judson walked in, pine needles stuck to his sleeves, holding a small burlap pouch. "Trapper rode through last night. Left this for you." She took it, untied the knot, and found 3 goose feathers bundled with twine and a flat piece of antler carved with her initials. "I don't know any trappers. Said his name was Rafe. Claimed you helped his sister once, years back." Delaney looked down at the carving, expression unreadable. "She was sick. I brought herbs. Their family didn't want a doctor, only someone who'd listen." Judson sat across from her, elbows on the table. "You never told me you did that kind of thing." "I didn't think it mattered." "It does." She didn't answer right away, just turned the antler over in her hand. "It's not a skill folks talk about. Women who know too much make people nervous." "You never made me nervous." A flicker of something passed between them, quiet, but solid. She tucked the feathers away in the drawer with her thread and needles. That afternoon, Judson hitched the wagon, and they drove out to the northeast ridge, where the soil held more stone than earth and the wind cut low. He wanted to mark the boundary before winter came, make sure the fence posts weren't giving way to the slow creep of shifting ground. Delaney took the reins halfway there, her arms steady, her eyes sharp on the trail. Halfway up the ridge, the wheel caught a rut. She slowed the team, climbed down, and kicked free the wedge of rock that had lodged behind the spoke. "You move like you've done this 100 times, Judson said, watching her from the seat. "I watched my brothers do it wrong for years. Hard not to learn something." Back on the bench, she chewed a sliver of dried pear from her pocket and passed the rest to him. The cold made them both quiet, but it wasn't the kind that pressed them apart. It was the kind that drew them nearer, like the hush before a fire catches. At the top of the ridge, they stood side by side, looking down at the valley below. A hawk circled far off, barely more than a smudge against the pale sky. "You ever think about children?" she asked, eyes still on the distance. Judson's brow furrowed. "Not lately. Never much point before." "Well, I do," she said. "Not yet. But I think I'd like a daughter who knows she doesn't have to be quiet to be good." He took her hand, rough palm against hers. "Then we'll raise her that way." They didn't say anything more as they rode home, the wagon creaking in rhythm with the horses' hooves. When the cabin came into view, the windows glowed faint with firelight. Delaney climbed down first, walked inside, and stirred the coals back to life. That night, she didn't sleep right away. Judson lay beside her, his hand resting over her ribs, steady and warm. "I want to teach," she said into the dark. He shifted just enough to hear her clearer. "Children, if the town ever permits me. I know my letters better than most women they allow behind a chalkboard." They'd be fools not to give you that post. She turned toward him, the soft weight of the quilt between them. Would you mind if I did? It'd mean a few days away each week come spring. I'd miss you. But I'd never stop you. Outside, frost crept up the corners of the windows, fine as lace. Inside, their breath mingled in the hush, and her fingers found his beneath the covers. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. In the morning, the trees would shine with ice, and the garden would sleep beneath its blanket of straw. But something new had begun in them, quiet as a seed in cold ground, waiting for warmth. The river had begun to freeze at the edges, pale sheets of ice clinging to the banks like lace collars. Delaney stood at the edge with a basket of washing tucked under one arm, her breath rising in soft clouds. She didn't linger long, just enough to check the currents, to see how much longer she could walk down with linens before the cold made it foolish. Back at the cabin, Judson was fitting a new latch to the barn door, his coat dusted with sawdust, sleeves rolled above his elbows. The first time she'd seen him work wood, he hadn't yet known she was watching. She still liked to catch him that way, unguarded and intent, the corner of his mouth drawn in concentration. Inside, the stove kept a low burn, and she set beans to soak for supper. The quiet hours of late autumn had a different shape to them, less urgent, more deliberate. They marked their days by what needed repair before the snow deepened. The root cellar was done. The fence line held. The hens were laying less, but still enough to trade for lamp oil. Delaney had begun stitching small paper booklets in the evenings, hand-sewn spines filled with lessons she remembered from her own schooling. She'd already sent one to the church elder's wife in town, asking if the school board might consider her come spring. No reply had come yet, but she wasn't idle while waiting. Judson came in at dusk, his cheeks ruddy with cold. "You see the ice?" she asked, handing him a mug of warm milk steeped with cloves. "Thicker than yesterday," he said, taking the mug. "I'll cut firewood double tomorrow. We'll need it." She sat down beside him, knees bumping his. "I've been thinking of adding a table along the back wall. Just something narrow. For the booklets, if they'll have me teach. You draw it, I'll build it," he said. "I want it to be mine, not from your hands. Just yours nearby would be enough." He didn't answer right away, just reached out and traced a line along her wrist where the stitching calloused her skin. "You don't need to ask permission to make something yours." "I know," she said, "but I want you to be part of it, even if just by standing close." That night, they shared the bed with the windows shuttered against the wind. She curled into him beneath the quilt, his chest warm at her back. "Your mama right again?" he asked softly. "No." I think that was all she had to say. Judson kissed the back of her neck, slow and certain. Then let her silence stay there. "You've got a life here that speaks louder." By mid-December, the letter arrived. The school board would consider her application come thaw. She read the note twice, then folded it into the pages of her Bible. She didn't tell Judson right away. Instead, she waited until he came in from trapping with snow in his beard and a fox pelt slung over his shoulder. "They said I can come speak in March," she said, handing him the letter. He read it, lips moving soundlessly, then looked up at her. "You want it." "I do." "Then you'll have it." She stepped into him, pressed her forehead to his. "I'll still keep the garden, still cook, still be what we are." "I know," he said, arms around her. "You don't have to say it like it's a promise." "It is," she said. "You're mine." Spring came slow, but it came. The snow melted in patches first, then in great sudden sheets. The creek ran high, and the smell of damp earth returned. Delaney rode into town in a borrowed dress and spoke her piece before the school board. She carried her booklets in a basket, her chin held high. When she returned, Judson was mending the wagon tongue. "They gave me the post," she said, standing beside him. He looked up, blinking once against the sun. "I never doubted they would." She leaned down, kissed him once, firm and certain. "We'll need to add to the cabin. I want a shelf for stories. And maybe someday a cradle." His smile was quiet, but full. "Then I'll start the woodwork tomorrow." They married again that June, this time with only the pastor, the schoolmistress, and 2 neighbors in attendance. Judson wore his Sunday coat. Delaney wore a new dress she'd stitched herself, the hem embroidered with goose feathers. She said her vows with her hands clasped around his, her voice steady. They built the shelf. They built the cradle. She taught letters and numbers to children who'd never held a pencil. And in the long evenings after supper, she read aloud while Judson whittled or repaired harnesses by firelight. Years passed under that roof. The garden grew. So did their home. In time, their daughter was born in early spring, her first breath taken as snow melted from the eaves. They named her Clara, for the way the light looked that morning, pale and perfect. Delaney taught in the schoolhouse until Clara was old enough to walk beside her. Judson never missed a harvest, never left a fence loose. He never once asked her to be anything but who she was. They grew older together, slower with each season, but always side by side. And in the quiet hours when the breeze shifted through the cottonwoods and the stove crackled low, they still sat close, knees touching, hands joined in the kind of love that doesn't fade, only deepens. And in that cabin between the hills, they carved out a life stitched with care and quiet joy, and every morning they woke knowing they'd chosen right.